Something awful happened to my parents. Now my mother won't stop screaming. We were on our way home after watching the new Hunger Games movie. My sister Olivia was falling asleep next to me. We were all silent, listening to the radio when my dad suddenly came to a full stop. It took me a second to realize what he had seen. A small truck was blocking most of the road in front of us. "What's going on there?" Olivia asked in a sleepy voice. That's when a young woman stumbled out of the truck and walked around it to the side that wasn't in vision. Her legs seemed to be hurt. She was grabbing the side of the truck to stay in balance. My parents immediately got into helper mode, seeing a person who didn't look much older than their children. I guess she was around 20 or so. "Stephen, call 911. "I'll go check if she's all right," my father said. "Maybe we should stay in the car and wait for help, honey. I've seen people tricking people into getting out of their car, and we can't just sit here and wait, Mary. There might be someone even more hurt on the other side." Before my mother could say anything else, he was already stepping out of the car. My mother opened her door to follow. "Kids, lock the car and stay inside." We were stopped on a quiet road. Around us were only trees. They slowly walked towards the other side of the truck. My father called out to the stranger. After that, we didn't hear anything else. I grabbed my phone and called an ambulance. "Should we check on them?" Olivia asked after a while. "I don't know," Mom said. Before I could finish my sentence, my mother appeared from the back of the truck. Her face had lost all its color. She was walking fast and determined. When she reached the car, Olivia unlocked the doors. She sat down behind the wheel without a word. Her expression was eerily calm. "Mom," I whispered, "what's going on? Is someone hurt?" My mother didn't respond. And suddenly she opened her mouth as wide as humanly possible and screamed from the top of her lungs. I unbuckled my seatbelt, leaned over and grabbed her by the shoulder. "Mom? Mom? Mom!" "What happened?" Olivia shouted and grabbed her door handle, but before she could open it, my mother had locked all the doors. She stopped screaming and took a few breaths before she hit the gas and started driving in reverse. After we were so far away that we couldn't really see the truck anymore, she turned around and took a different road to our home. She didn't respond to us. She didn't answer any questions. We kept asking about Dad, but she said nothing. Next to me, Olivia started crying, and she took out her phone to call the police again. When we reached our driveway, my mother finally unlocked the car. Still silent, she walked straight home. Olivia and I exchanged a look of fear and shock. Then she jumped to the front of the car. "I'm going back. You go inside." "No, I'm coming with you." Even from inside the car, we heard the shrill sound of my mother's scream coming from our house. We ignored it and kept driving until we found the road with the trees. I kept trying to call my dad the entire time, but it went straight to voicemail. There was a police car waiting, but no sign of a truck. One officer was waiting by the police car. Another one was looking around the side of the road. We jumped out of the car and asked where our father was. The officer told us that they arrived a few minutes ago and that there was no sign of anyone. At first, they asked us if we played a prank on them, but when he saw our concerned faces and listened to our story, he said that they would follow us home and talk to our mother. "Don't worry, we will do anything we can to find your father," he said before we went back into the car. My entire body was trembling. I had never in my life experienced anything this frightening, and I couldn't stop thinking about my dad. I hated that he didn't listen to my mom's concerns. When we reached our house, the lights in the kitchen were on. The officers followed us inside. My mother wasn't screaming anymore, but we heard the kettle in the kitchen. We followed the sound, expecting to find my mother there. I almost cried in relief when I saw that it was actually my dad. His hair was greasy and he had changed into his pajamas. "Kids, I've been worried sick about you," he said loudly, and then his gaze shifted to the two police officers. "Sir, are you all right?" "Dad, we've been trying to call you. What the hell happened?" Olivia shouted and tried to run to him, but one of the officers held her back. "I'm absolutely fine. Fantastic even. Except for the fact that I had to take a taxi home. The prices of that..." "Sir, we need to ask you what happened to the truck and the woman inside." My dad shook his head. "She was fine. Her car just wouldn't start, so I helped her and then she drove off. All good." "Was there anyone else with her?" My dad shook his head. "May we talk to your wife?" She already went to bed, but I suppose we can wake her up. One of the officers walked upstairs with my father, while Olivia and I stayed in the kitchen with the other one, and explained the situation one more time. When the other officer returned, he explained to us that my mother told the same story about the broken-down car. Apparently, my mother remembered that the stove was still on, so she quickly drove home with us. You could hear the skepticism in his voice, but there wasn't much else they could do. They gave us their number and told us to call when anything else came up or parents said anything. After they left, I went to touch the stove. It was ice cold. A little after that, my mother started screaming again. I hardly slept that night. We kept asking my mom what had happened, but she didn't answer our questions. My dad just kept telling us that everything was fine and sent us to bed. Finally, my mother stopped screaming, and the house turned silent. The next morning, I walked down and heard the sound of laughter. My parents were standing in the kitchen making pancakes without a care in the world. Olivia was already sitting by the table, staring into nothing in front of her, her expression empty. We locked eyes, and I saw that she had slept just as little as I. "Morning, honey. Did you sleep well?" my mother said in a melodic voice. "Apparently everything is totally fine," Olivia said in a mocking tone towards me. I sat down next to her, and my mother started stacking pancakes on a plate and walked towards me. She stopped right in front of the table and dropped the plate. The shatters flew in all directions. Suddenly her face turned pale again. Her eyes were opened wide, and then she screamed again, looking at us the entire time. "Mom?" Olivia jumped up from her seat and grabbed her shoulders. "Everything is all right, love," my father calmly said. My mother blinked and looked at the ground. Her face relaxed. "Oh, won't you look at that? What a mess," she said and smiled at us. We went through the strangest breakfast we ever had. Olivia and I had stopped asking them what was going on. We didn't get answers anyway. Their attempts to distract us were only frustrating and scaring us more. After breakfast, I followed my sister to her room. Olivia was only a year younger than me, and we'd always been very close. I don't know how I would have dealt with this situation without her. We were both afraid of and for our parents. "What do we do?" she asked after I sat down on her desk chair. "I don't know. Should we call someone? Uncle Freddie, maybe?" We didn't have many relatives that lived nearby. Uncle Freddie was the only one, and he was still an hour's drive away. Not sure if he can do anything. They're acting like everything is normal. "Except when Mum screams," Olivia said, and shiver went down my spine at the thought of it. "Something happened with that truck. I just wish they would tell us," my sister whispered. "Me too. And Dad is acting even stranger. He doesn't even acknowledge her screams." We both sat there for a moment, lost in our thoughts, when we heard the door downstairs close shut, and a little later the car started running. Olivia looked out the window. "It's Dad." So Mum's alone downstairs. We quietly walked down the stairs and made our way to our living room. My mother was sitting on the sofa, in her hand. She held a needle and yarn, but she wasn't moving. She looked completely spaced out. When she noticed us, she slightly moved her face towards us. Her mouth opened, but this time she didn't scream. She just kept it open. I walked over to her and sat down on the ground in front of her. "Please, Mum, talk to us. I don't know if you're trying to protect us from something, but this isn't helping. We're old enough and we are here for you. What happened last night?" She blinked and then shook her head as if she was just waking up from a daydream. Her mouth closed again. Her eyes went to me and then to my sister. It's hard to remember. Something keeps blocking my memories. I know that something isn't right, but it's almost as if my mind keeps falling asleep. I can't control it. Olivia came closer and sat down beside me. "Maybe we should take you to a doctor. I mean, the screaming really scares us, Mom." My mother looked confused. "What screaming?" I swallowed. "Do you remember anything about that woman?" "We lost her." Her eyes opened wide for a moment. It looked as if she was smiling, but then her mouth opened so much that her face got all wrinkly. From the looks of it, it was as if she was screaming, but this time no sound came out.
I just grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. Finally, her expression softened. Her eyes and mouth closed for a moment.
She looked at the terrified faces of my sister and me. Then she tightly grabbed my arm. She wasn't a woman. I don't know what she was. It all happened so fast. But kids, a tear rolled down her cheek. I saw your father die. I saw your father die. I don't know who that man is. That came back to us. Dread filled my entire body. It felt as if a dark blanket was falling over us. I heard my mother's words, but I just couldn't believe her. I didn't want to. Suddenly, I heard the door slam shut. Olivia got up and pulled out her phone. She was just about to call an ambulance when my father walked into the room. My mother's face changed again. She was smiling, genuinely smiling. Mom isn't feeling well. I'm calling a doctor for her, Olivia said with a trembling voice. She looked at me, and I saw how afraid she was of my dad. She was trying to get us out of here. My father took the phone from her hand and shook his head. No need. Your mother is fine. Everything is perfectly fine. I was actually thinking we could go to the cinema again tonight. I forced my body to get up. That sounds like a fine idea. I haven't seen the new Hunger Games movie yet. How about that one? He smiled. That sounds like a terrific idea. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet either, Olivia added. Can you get our coats from upstairs, Dad? He got up without a word and walked up the stairs. Olivia and I each grabbed one of my mother's arms. Together we quickly walked her outside and got her into the car, still wearing our pajamas and no shoes. Where are we going? My mother asked from the back seat. We're going to visit Uncle Freddie, Olivia answered in a shaky voice. But, honey, we can't just leave your dad here. He'll get lonely.